Hey everyone in 4-H land, welcome to my kitchen. I'm Gemma. I'm an academic coordinator with the University of California 4-H Youth Development Program. And today, as part of our 4-course meal, I'm making dessert. And what we're making today is zucchini brownies. And the recipe I'm using is a plant-based recipe. And I'm also making it allergen-free. So if you have allergies to eggs or nuts, which are the typical ones, or gluten, this recipe has none of those things. And I'll talk about some of the substitutions you can make if you don't have any allergies and that's not a concern for you. And we'll talk about why I used what I used and as we go forward. The first thing we're gonna do is we're going to preheat our oven. So I'm gonna walk over to the oven. Hang on, I'll take you there. The first thing we're going to do is preheat our oven. If you haven't used your oven in your home before, be sure to get help from an adult to show you how your oven works because they're all a little bit different. But you can see it's 9:04 in my home right now. And the way that we set my oven is I hit the bake button. I choose the up arrow for the temperature and it comes up 350. I'm going to hit the bake button again. 350 is a standard temperature. That's usually the one that pops up first if you have a digital setting because it's pretty common as a temperature to bake things at. And you can see that the oven light came on and the preheat light came on. So the oven light, of course, just tells me the oven's on. And the preheat light tells me that the oven is heating from cold. As soon as the oven reaches the temperature of 350 degrees, the one I chose, then the preheat light will go off and it tells me that my oven is ready. Okay, so the oven is preheated. Now the next thing we're gonna do is we're going to grate some zucchini. I've actually already pre-grated most of the zucchini we're going to need, but I'm going to show you how to use a grater and talk about safe grater use. So here's my grater. Graters come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. I just like this simple one. It balances over a bowl nicely. You might have a box grater. Some people have graters that have a safety guard on the top. If you have a grater like that, that's actually the safest thing to use, but a lot of people don't have that with the finger guard. If you have that, please use this finger guard because it helps protect your fingers. These ridges on the grater are a little sharp and they can, put little micro cuts on your fingers. So you want to avoid that. But the safest way is to use the grater, balance it on top of the bowl like this one, get a firm grip on the handle. Almost all graters have a handle of some kind. And then just put simple, firm pressure down the grater. The other thing sometimes I like to do is prop it up on its side and there's just grate at an angle. But you see I'm keeping my hands and my fingers far away, right? Just grate that. And if you could bounce the bowl around, it's no big deal. Just don't bounce a glass bowl on the ground. So you might want to use a plastic bowl. And then I just grate down to, we're not going to keep doing that because it's boring to watch grating, right? So, but you want to leave about that much away so that you don't get your fingers down to where the grating action happens. So if you do cut your finger in a bowl for some reason, like let's say your hand slips, a couple things you've learned, right? Like maybe you put too much pressure, you don't need to use as much pressure, especially on something like a zucchini. But if you do cut your finger, you're going to have to throw all of that away, right? Because you might be contaminated. So wash your hands, get a Band-Aid, and then start over. So that's how you use a grater. Pretty simple. It's a simple tool, cleans up easily. And what we're using obviously today is grated zucchini in our recipe. All right, so this recipe calls for 1 cup of grated zucchini. So I'm going to put that little bit in our bowl because I had already measured out a whole cup zucchini. So here's our grated zucchini. We're going to dump that in our bowl. Okay, you can see my little bowl here. I'll show you. I've got a bowl going. And really the cool thing about this recipe is that everything pretty much just gets dumped in a bowl. It's really easy. So 1 cup of grated zucchini. And sometimes when you use recipes to bake in that you bake with zucchini, they have you squish the water out. Not this one, because it is plant-based. There's a good reason for that. And I'll talk about that in a second. Then we're using 3/4 of a cup of sun butter. Okay, so here's the replacement for sun butter. Sun butter is made from sunflower seeds, right? So that's why it's a non-allergen. Many people that are allergic to peanuts or peanut, so that would be peanut butter, or tree nuts like cashews, pecans. You can use any kind of nut butter in this recipe that you want. If you're not allergic to peanuts, oh, there's our timer on our oven going off. Remember, we started with turning our oven on and preheating it. So that beep was just telling me the preheat's done. So good timing, right? So anyway, so 3/4 cup of sun butter. So I'm using this as a non-allergen recipe. But if you don't have an allergy to peanuts or tree nuts and you have peanut butter at home, or you have almond butter, or you have cashew butter, any of those will work in this recipe with the equal measure. So 3/4 a cup of whatever butter you're using. Not regular butter. It has to be a nut butter, seed butter, that kind of thing. Okay, 3/4 a cup. And then I have here maple syrup. So there's a 1/4 cup of maple syrup and just a little splash of vanilla mixed in with that. So that gets dumped in the bowl. So once again, plant-based, right? So our maple syrup is plant-based. All right, so that's our sweetener. Then, so I mentioned earlier that we're doing this, non-allergen recipe. So a lot of people have allergies to eggs. Not a lot of people, some people. And so, but you need something in the recipe that helps bind the ingredients together, right? So that's what kind of eggs do. So we have to have an egg replacer. So in this bowl, what I have are 3 things. I'll show it to you. So I have the cocoa powder. So that is a 1/4 cup of cocoa powder, and it's 2 tablespoons of flaxseed and 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda. Okay, so those all in the bowl. It's all in this bowl, pre-mixed, and it's just gonna go in this bowl. So the flaxseed is the thing that replaces eggs in this recipe. Flax seeds are a great binder, but the trick with flax seeds is you have to get them ground, okay? So when you buy your flaxseed, make sure that it says on the label, ground flaxseed. You can buy the whole seeds. They're really tiny. They look like birdseed. And you can grind them yourself in a food mill or a little grinder. You can do that. But it's easy to buy ground flaxseed. So I buy ground flaxseed. So the reason we didn't squish out the water from the zucchini is because the flaxseed will absorb all that water. Okay, it's part of the action of this recipe. So as you're thinking about that, so here's my question. Is baking a science or is it an art? What do you think? You can go ahead and put notes in the comments. Okay, see what you think. Is baking a science or an art? And then tell me why you think that. And then I'll add comments later and tell you why I think whatever it is, right? I'll answer that too, but I'll wait and let you guys decide. Okay, then the last ingredient is a 1/4 cup of chocolate chips. And of course, I buy vegan chocolate chips, so plant-based chocolate chips. They're really good. And I also buy the kind that don't have sugar in them. So they're sweetened with stevia, which once again is plant-based. It makes it still a vegan option. So a little bit of mini chips go in there. And you mix that all together. It's really a fast recipe, right? You just mix it really well. And I know mixing on the, on a video is kind of boring, but it goes so fast with this recipe that it won't be too bad. All right, so then I'm going to pour all this. It's all mixed. Pretty simple. I'll show it to you. There we go. Pre-mixed. I use this little scooper spatula that I really like. It's one of my favorite tools in the kitchen. And then I also pre-greased just a loaf pan. Okay, whatever loaf pan you have in the house works fine. So this recipe, you can double it. We're just going to dump all this in the loaf pan. You don't have to watch me do that while I talk. So it's going to go in the loaf pan. I double this recipe pretty frequently, and I just put it in a square baking pan that's 9x9 or 8x9. You can put it in a pie pan. It doesn't really matter what your baking utensil is, but just know that this recipe with the 1 cup of zucchini will fit really nicely in a loaf pan. But if you double it, you'll need obviously a bigger pan, right? All right, so we're just going to dump all that into the loaf pan. Okay, I've got that all spread nicely into the loaf pan. The last little thing I like to do is sprinkle a few more chocolate chips on top, just so it looks, the presentation is pretty, right? Or it looks like attractive. Now the zucchini will bake out of here. You won't even see it once it's baked, so you know, it won't look weird like that right now, like it is right now. You won't even notice. In fact, if you don't tell anybody that you put zucchini in here, no one will know. So there we go. And I don't think I told you what I greased the pan with. So once again, plant-based, so I greased it with a little bit of coconut oil. So you don't want to use butter. You can use any vegetable spray, that kind of thing. Just if you're sticking to the plant-based or you're vegan, yeah, make sure you're using a plant-based oil to lightly grease the pan that you're baking in. But like I said, I use coconut oil. Okay, so the next step is to take their pan into the oven for 30 to 35 minutes. You kind of have to watch it, set your timer for 30 minutes and see how it's doing, but you can tell that it's done by if the sides are starting to pull away a little bit from the pan, and the edges will be a little bit raised and the middle will be a little sunken, but it won't be jiggly, right? So you can also use a toothpick, but because this particular recipe is plant-based, you might, your toothpick might come out as a tester with a little bit of brownie mix on it. But so I really look at the dryness of the top, making sure it looks, shiny, but it's not jiggly, and that the edges are completely a little bit raised and that they're starting to pull away from the pan a little bit. You can also go by smell. Sometimes I use as like, it smells like things are starting to be done, so you want to check it at that point. So we'll be back in about 30 to 35 minutes and we'll show you what the final result looks like. Okay, the timer just went out. I just pulled it out of the oven. This is what it looks like. You want to make sure you use oven mitts to take hot things out of the oven. I'm trying to get a good angle here with the natural light. So that's what it looks like. It rose a little bit. It kind of does sink in the middle. You can kind of see those edges kind of just like brownies normally do, just like regular brownies kind of have little raised edges and they sink in the middle. And so we're going to let that cool until it's completely cool. And with this recipe, because this is dessert and in our 4-course meal that we're doing, you could prepare this recipe the night before and put it in the fridge. You want to put it in an airtight container. And I wouldn't cut it up until you're ready to serve, right? Because the pieces would dry out. So just leave it, you can leave it in your container and cover it tightly with some plastic wrap, or move the whole thing into an airtight container, leave it in the fridge overnight till it's completely cool, and then cut it up then. But it's ready for your dessert. Or you could do it the morning of. And so I would always do your dessert, first, way ahead of time of the rest of your meal so that it's ready to go. But we're gonna let this cool and I'll come back and I'll plate it and we'll see how that looks in a few minutes. See you in a bit. Okay, we're back. The brownies are completely cooled and I'll show you what they look like. Let me just tilt this down. So there they are in the pan. I'll bet some of you are thinking, zucchini flaxseed brownies, that's gonna be gross, but they're really not. So comes easily out of the pan. Here's what they look like on a plate. You can kind of see the crumb on this one. It's got a really good crumb. They're really super moist, and they taste like a brownie. So here's the thing though about this particular recipe. I told you I modified this to be allergen free. And so normally the recipe calls for peanut butter. And so, peanut butter and chocolate are a classic combination, and a lot of people really like that. If you don't have a peanut allergy and no one in your house does, I would make it with the peanut butter just because it really adds, that peanut butter chocolate flavor. If you don't like peanut butter and chocolate together, the other nut butter that I would highly recommend is the cashew butter. Cashews have basically no taste. They don't have a lot of flavor when you bake them into things, but it gives it that really rich, dense texture that these brownies really need in addition to the flaxseed. So cashew butter is my other go-to kind of butter. Almond butter is less expensive, more readily available. It will work as well. So any of the nut butters like I talked about. The sunflower butter, the sun butter, really does have a distinct sunflower taste, and it does come through in these brownies. So oftentimes chocolate will mask other flavors. In this case, it doesn't mask the sun butter flavor because it's such a flavor forward profile. So you get the combination of chocolate and sunflower seeds together. But if you think about chocolate covered sunflower seeds, it's kind of the same experience. But people that have allergies would really appreciate that extra effort that you go to make that happen. The other thing I talked about was flaxseed. So flaxseed, again, is the egg replacer. If you don't have an egg allergy and you want to add egg to this recipe, I've done that before. When I don't have flaxseed, I can just put 1 egg in instead of the 2 tablespoons of the ground flaxseed. So you can use an egg instead of the flaxseed. So that's another substitution that you could make that does not affect how this recipe bakes out. You would get the same kind of baked out results that you get with the flaxseed. I don't see any difference in how it bakes. So I had an original question to you all about, is baking science or is it art? And so I'd love to see your comments on that. And then I also want you to think about what are in these ingredients. We talked about zucchini and we have chocolate and we have the flaxseed. Like, what are the nutritional values of that? And I'm not going to answer that. I'm going to let you go investigate for yourself. But all of those have nutritional value, even the chocolate. Some people don't even know that chocolate has nutritional value and can do wonderful things for your body. So go find out, do some exploring and some researching about what are the values or the nutritional values of brownies. So happy baking, happy cooking. We'd love to see your menus when you finish the whole thing. If you put all 4 things together, send us your pictures. We'd love to see them. Have a great rest of your summer. Take good care.